Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Montazar. I am Irrigation and Water Management Advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension for Imperial, Riverside, and San Diego counties. Thanks to the California Avocado Society for putting together this seminar and invitation. I was asked to talk about evapotranspiration or crop water consumption or ET in avocados. As you might know, ET is not a new term to the hydrology. It comes from many years ago, and scientists and researchers worked together on this topic for many, many years to develop tools and methodologies to measure and estimate this very complicated term. So I believe ET is the most complicated terms of hydrology and soil-water balance. Perhaps that's the reason we call it ET, or evapotranspiration, which is the sum of plant transpiration and soil evaporation. So plant evapotranspiration is a beneficial water use. So it directly has a relationship with the yield, quality, and quantity. But the soil evaporation is a non-beneficial water use. It's something like deep percolation or surface runoff. So any other use of water, like leaching and using water for cooling or heat stress management, so they are all beneficial. So sometimes if you put mulch on the ground, it has direct impacts on soil evaporation. Basically, any mulch on the ground can reduce soil evaporation. But the question will be, what factors determine the crop water use of my avocado trees? There are many of these factors. Several of them are here in the screen. On the top, you see weather. Soil radiation, temperature, wind speed, and humidity are the major weather parameters may impact water use. When it comes to plants, tree size, how old are the tree? They are a driver. Canopy management and pruning, how do you do the pruning? When? If there is any cover crop or other vegetation on the ground, they may impact the crop water use. And of course, soil types and condition. If your soil is salt affected or a high amount or concentration of chloride, if you have sandy soil or silty clay or clay soil, so the evapotranspiration will be different. But one of the major factors is topography. So the slope, the aspect, and elevation may have significant impact on the crop water use of your avocado orchard. So most of the time, we have a higher evapotranspiration on the south-facing and west-facing slopes than north and east-facing slopes. So which irrigation system we use and how frequent we do irrigation events. So they also have some impacts on crop water use and evapotranspiration. So it's all about where and when we talk about. So we are talking about avocado site 1, low density, a lot of weeds or cover crop on the ground, or a high density orchard we have in site 3, or we are talking about in early May with a lot of bloomings on the ground, or a 45-year orchard like what we see in site 6. So there are the major differences. So when and where we talk about. So we talk about mature orchard, which the most light comes from the sun are intercepted, or no, immature orchard, which some of the light also are reflected. So the canopy cover percentage has a significant impact on light interception. So higher canopy coverage, we expect a higher evapotranspiration. So there are tools we can measure evapotranspiration or ET directly. Lacimeter is the most popular one. So there is a cultivation tank. We plant the exact crop we have around the lacimeter, and we measure it with the scales we have on the below of the lacimeter. But the problem with lacimeter is they need a lot of maintenance. They are also very expensive. So this is one of the largest lacimeter all over the in the world. So we have it at UC Davis. It comes from about 70 years ago. So I used to manage this lacimeter between 2014 2017. We had a lot of challenges for maintenance, calibration. It needs regular calibration, and it's very costly, as I mentioned. At the time, we estimated if we want to do the same lacimeter or build the same lacimeter with the same diameter and infrastructure, so it costs about $500,000 or more to build such instrument. But there are also different methods we can indirectly measure evapotranspiration. So eddy covariance and surface runoff are some of those measurements. And over the last 4 years, we use this technology and equipments to measure the actual evapotranspiration or ET in 12 different sites, avocado sites in California, all the way from San Diego County to Ventura counties. So I will share some of the results we found from this study. So let's go back to the definition. Crop water use, or ET. So how we can measure or estimate it, or what is really ET? So we have different ET. So one of the very well recognized ET is ETO, which it accounts for weather. It comes from the CIMIS station from California Irrigation Management Information System. So in California, we have 18 different ETO zones. When you look at San Diego County, we have 4 different ET zones. Closer to the coast, so we have lower evapotranspiration or lower ET. So the entire year ETO in zone 4 close to the coast is about 48 inches. And when we go to the desert region of the county, so the evapotranspiration is significantly increased, about 62.5 inches. This is the estimation for the annual ETO in zone 16. So this is one estimation I did just to interpret how important ET and following crop water needs is for irrigation scheduling in San Diego County. So we have a specific geography in this county. So here I'm comparing evapotranspiration in Fallbrook compared to Escondido and Pine Valley. As you can see in this graph, so please let's just talk about July. So in July, we see there is a significant difference between ETO or reference ET among these 3 cities. So we have crop water needs in Pine Valley is about 40% more than Fallbrook and about 25% than Escondido. Let's talk about lemon. So we might have lemon in all these areas. So we have lemon orchard with tree spacing of 20 by 14 feet. So this is our best estimation for lemon. If we have lemon orchard in these 3 locations, so the same old, trees, the same irrigation system, and the same soil type, there is a significant difference with the crop water needs of those orchards. In Fallbrook, we might need about 38 gallons per day per tree. In Escondido, about 43, and in Pine Valley, 54 gallon per day per tree. So as you can see, the difference is very significant. One of the great tools, I believe, for a county like San Diego County is a special CIMIS, because we have, specific geography, a lot of topographic changes, but these tools can give us a good estimation for reference ET or grass ET. So every day, this map, special CIMIS map, is developed by Department of Water Resources for the entire state of California, and your orchard is part of this map. So what you need to do is you go to this website, you go to a special report by coordinate web page, you create a free account for yourself and provide the coordinates of the center of your orchard. It doesn't matter if you can add 10 different locations or 10 different orchards if you have, or even for the other crops you might have. So you put the information of the coordinates, and every day at 6 a.m. you will receive one email. Of course, you need to provide your email address too. And every day at 6 a.m. you receive an email, and they provide you the ETO for the sites you provided the coordinates. So very user-friendly tools. You don't need even to go to the CIMIS website anymore. Basically, you receive every day the ETO or grass ET for the last 7 days in your location. This is one example, a report I received from CIMIS, special CIMIS for several avocado sites I have. So let's focus just on March 29. So you clearly see the ETO in those sites are different, just even for one day. The avocado site 1, 0.12 inch a day, site 4, 0.14, site 6, 0.11 inch a day, and site 7, 0.13. So those differences needs to be considered for irrigation management and scheduling. So another tools for ETO is FRET. It gives you a forecast for evapotranspiration, for grass evapotranspiration for the next 7 days. So here I have one evaluation for you. So I have one site, avocado sites nearby Escondido. So here the red circle. And I got this in late March, and it gives me the next 7 days information. So this is for April 1. So the change of color shows change of evapotranspiration from blue to yellow. So your evapotranspiration might change from 0.1 to 0.3. So let's see what happened in just 1 week. April 1. So we have about 0.1 inch a day in this location. So April 2nd, a little bit higher ETO. April 3, less ETO. April 4, you can see the ETO is increased. And April 5, even more. And again, April 6, even more. It goes to about 0.16, 0.17 inches. And again, April 7. So this is a great tools, I believe, for avocado irrigation management, specifically if you have concerns about heat stress and heat wave during summertime. So this site can provide you the ETO for the next 7 days. So this is a deal. A special CIMIS provides you ETO for the past 7 days. So FRET tools provide you ETO for the next 7 days. So it means at the time, anytime you have, 14 ETO for 14 days, and you can use this information for your irrigation scheduling. So we have another ET, we call it ETC. So the ETC is for your individual crop, depending which crop we are talking about. So what you need is the ETO, which comes from CIMIS station, and you multiply that ET by KC, which accounts for crop. Depending which crop you have, here we have avocados, so we need to use crop coefficient or KC for avocados. So, very easy through this equation, you can estimate your crop water needs for avocados. But in the real world, we always have some stress, comes from different sources. Sometimes we have water stress, sometimes salinity stress, and sometimes heat stress. So what is happening in the real world on the field, it might be different from the ETC. So the ETC is crop water needs without any stress. But if there is a stress, which, sometimes, so I cannot say really always, but sometimes we have some stress in the field, and it's really hard to measure all those stress and include in your estimation. So recently we published an article from the findings of our recent research. It provides you good information about the crop coefficient and variation of evapotranspiration for California Hass avocados. But I try to use some of that result here and share with you, about avocados. So this is two graphs for two avocado sites, site 4 and site 1. It shows daily evapotranspiration over the last 3 years. So I also, developed a graph for each site. It shows the average of, the average 7 days ET for these sites. So you see a lot of variation, even in, 2 days, just, after day, you see different evapotranspiration. So we see a lot of variation in both sides. Even though these sites are about 25-30 miles away, but still you see the absolute values of actual evapotranspiration or water use in these sites are different. So here I have the crop coefficient we developed for site 4. So site 4 has tree spacing of 20 by 19 feet, south facing 44% of a slope, and average canopy coverage is about 82. So you clearly see here, we see variations over time in this site. So I have data crop coefficient for about 3 years in this site, and you see the variation. Spring we have higher, then goes to summertime, lower crop coefficient, again comes to fall and spring higher, and again the same. So the average, I have the average monthly crop coefficient curve here for this site. You see, for example, here it shows in July, August 2022, we see a crop coefficient of 0.7, and it goes up to 0.88 in this site during January. Another site, tree spacing are different, lower, the slope is also lower, and of course the canopy coverage also is lower than the site 4. So we see again the same trend in this site, and very interesting, we observe the same trend in all 12 sites we've worked, but the absolute values of the crop coefficient in different time are different in this side. So you can see here in this side, so the same trend, but the values are lower than, for example, here in June 22, we had about 0.62, 63 as crop coefficient, and it went up during winter to 0.82. So this is the average crop coefficient values over the season. We have the average of 3 years in this side, so in different months. So again, the same, as I mentioned, the average of crop coefficient shows higher values in early season than even spring and summertime, and then again, higher values in the fall. So we try to interpret why we should have this trend. So again, the trend, this is a trend we found. To summarize, we see greater crop coefficient values during a flower bud initiation, development to flowering to fruit set, then fruit development. And I already talked about, higher value, lower value during summer, increasing gradually from late September to a maximum in mid-winter, again gradually reduced during spring to a minimum in mid-season. So this is our best, explanation for these changes. So avocado leaves have a very thick waxy cuticle that helps reduce water loss from leaf surface and stomata. And in spring, we have young leaves, flowers, and young fruits, which, their cuticle are not fully developed, and they might lose more water than the rest of the year. We also know avocado requires a high energy in fall and winter for oil accumulation in fruit and floral development phases, and may use a higher rate of water for photosynthesis activities than grass. So it might be a main reason for higher crop coefficient during fall and winter. So this is also one other observation we have. Is not just for avocados. We observe this result for the other side and other crops. So during late fall and winter, the weather is unstable and there are more cloudy and rainy days, and we have wet soils. So the crop coefficient values could be higher under that circumstances. So this is the average monthly crop values of avocado orchard at site 1. So as we can see, it shows, very low value during January and December, about 1.6 inches monthly. And it is increased every month by the maximum in July. It increased to 4.6 at this site. But this is the conclusion, for Escondido. This is one site, Escondido and Temecula. It shows 65% of the total or seasonal avocado crop water use is happening between April and September. And about 35% of the crop water use is happening from October to March. So it means in fall and winter, avocado also needs a significant amount of water, about 35%. So specifically, if we have dry fall and winter, so the irrigation management and scheduling, is quite important, and those time. So this is the avocado, crop water use, the comparison between 4 sites. That's monthly data. So we see differences in different months among these sites. We have a site 7, very close to the Coast in Ventura County. So among these 4 sites, you see it, the crop water use for that site is the lower. Just let's talk about July and December. So site 4, we needed the highest amount of water. So about 38 gallon per day, the average in July. So the average at site 7 was 12.5 gallon per day, the average of monthly. Then in December, you see a significant reduction. So from 38 was decreased at site 4 to about 14 gallon per day. And from 12, it was increased. It was reduced to about 5 gallon per day. But one conclusion for all sites, this is a very common conclusion we have. So the avocado water demand during late fall, early winter is less than 1/3 of the water needs in July. So that's the common conclusion we have in all sites. So this is another comparison between the seasonal crop water use among these 4 sites. So you obviously see, a significant difference for seasonal water use. Changes from 28 inches to 40 inches. When we go from the coastal climate to inland valley, so we see a significant difference. When we include the impact of spacing to estimate the gallon per tree water use, we see, the significant difference. So data shows for these 4 sites, so the crop water needs may change from 3,000 gallon per tree at the site is affected by coastal climate to about 9,000 gallon per tree with a low density orchard in Escondido and inland valley. So very significant difference. We really cannot, compare the avocado water needs even with our neighbors, because, there are different factors may impact your crop water needs. This is a real example about the avocado orchard water budget. So I have the water applied and actual ETV measure in this site. So the blue bars shows the applied water. It includes rain plus irrigation. And the green bars shows the crop water use, what we measure. So you see a lot of differences. Most of the time, the water applied are higher than crop water use, except 1 month. So in April 2023, we see, lower water applied than crop water use. It summarized these bars. The percentage of water applied. So we see from May 22 to July 22, so the grower applied 11% to 18% more than crop needed. I think, 11 or 15% over irrigating in avocados than crop water needs, is not a big deal, I think, because the grower has some, leaching concerns or any other concerns at the field. So it makes sense. But when it comes to August, September, October, and November, we see, anywhere from 44 to 75% over irrigating than crop water needs. I think on those months, perhaps grower can do a better job. We don't really need 75% over irrigating in September. So when it comes to fall and winter, we had a wet winter 2023. So we see a lot of over irrigating, mostly comes from rain, and that's it. There is nothing a grower can do. But that rain also, it had a great contribution on the salt leaching and cleaning up the soil salinity. We documented that impact. So just, let you know, we have the salinity for 3 years, continuous, 3 years, 2022, 2023, 2024. It shows the salinity and fluoride concentration in the leaves in 2023 was the lowest among those 3 years. And I believe it's an impact, a positive impact from rain, and our growers cannot do a good job as rain can do for leaching management. Then in April, growers applied 27% less than crop water needs. So our estimation is during this period, 12 months, so grower applied about 6 inches or half acre feet per acre more than all the needs, leaching and heat and also, irrigation management and that field. So half acre feet per acre in San Diego County cost, I think, a lot for our growers, and we can manage that over irrigating. So this is the soil moisture monitoring data. It shows the soil water tension in one of our sites. So as you can see in early season, growers applied water very more frequently. By June, in mid-June, we see very light potential water stress. I think the grower was late for irrigation event. We also see, this is the winter 2023. We had a wet winter, but even in one wet winter, when you see, no rain about 25, 26 days, so your soil water may, reduce, and you need one light irrigation. I vision that time grower did one light irrigation. You see the soil water depletion here. It went down to about 100 centibar, which is higher than soil water tension we expect as a threshold for avocado. So one great tool for irrigation management we have for avocados, irrigation scheduling calculator for avocados. So we have these tools. So great tools for our growers. They can go to this website. So enter the information of their orchard and, have the information for irrigation management. One data you need to enter is the crop coefficient. I think that's the problem in the past. These tools put you in darkness. So you need to, based on your, evaluation, to put one crop coefficient here. But now we developed this crop coefficient for California has avocados. So you have that information more accurately as regional information. You can use this. So let me just go with one evaluation to see what happened if you use this tool with a crop coefficient of 0.7, which this is what we recommend for this specific, orchard I'm talking about now. And what happened if we use crop coefficient of 0.7? So these bars shows the water per tree, gallon per tree, we measured during July 2022. All the bars shows daily crop water needs. So this is what irrigation calculator provides us. If we enter 0.7 as crop coefficient, you see a little bit higher values. But when we put crop coefficient of 0.8 in this calculator, you see even more crop water needs is calculated. So this is the evaluation I have for you. If you follow if you use these tools and use 0.7 as your crop coefficient, you see about 14% over irrigating for this orchard. I think is acceptable. All the concerns from heat and leaching and everything, and lower water distribution uniformity you have in this field. When you use 0.8 as crop coefficient, you are over irrigating 32% in July for that year. So I think 0.7, of course, you can conserve water, so you can compensate for all the water needs for your orchard and your trees. So that's it shows the importance of more accurate crop coefficient you should use for your irrigation management. So this is another tool, OpenET. This is a free tool, a satellite-based tool. So the OpenET can provide you the actual ET estimation for your orchard. So what you need to do is you go to this website, you find your orchard, and then it can provide you the crop water needs of your orchard. So this is a new online platform for mapping evapotranspiration at the scale of individual farms. It provides you a daily, monthly ET data. So it has 6 satellite-based model and also ensemble data, which that's the average of those 6 satellite model. This is the data I have for one avocado site in Escondido. So it provides the first 2 weeks of January 2019 for this site. So you see each column shows the amount of ET from different satellite model. It also provides you grass ET and rainfall. Might be very useful for you. But the question is, how accurate are these numbers and satellite based? So, since we have the real data and major data, we can talk about and we can do some evaluation. I'm working on this issue. We will publish very soon an article on this, how accurate is OpenET for avocados, and if our growers want to use OpenET for their avocado orchard, so what consideration they need to pay attention. So this is the graph I have for about 1 year. So the red graph shows what we measure at this site, that avocado site. And the other color shows the data from the other models. So you see some differences. Sometimes those models overestimating ET than what we measured, and sometimes underestimate. If we just talk about the ensemble OpenET, which is the average of those, so data shows overestimating sometimes and underestimating as well. This is the one comparison can give you some ideas. So this data shows basically OpenET at this site underestimate the avocado orchard during January to March, but overestimate the ET for the rest of the year. So you see, sometimes underestimate, sometimes overestimate. For this site, or estimation is, evaluation is OpenET overestimated the daily ET averagely 29%, about 30% overestimated. So you need to consider if you want to use this. But we evaluated OpenET across 4 sites. So the average overestimate daily ET is about 24% over these 4 sites and 2 years evaluation. So I have some take-home message from this talk. So I talk about the spatial and temporal variation of crop coefficient and crop water consumption of avocado orchard. Several factors may impact your crop water needs: climate, slope and row orientation, elevation, height of trees canopy, which is a good indicator of canopy size and the amount of light interception, irrigation management practices, and salinity and your soil type differences. So they are the major factors. But if you talk about avocado orchard in one climate region, so our data shows a slope and row orientation along with the canopy coverage percentage are the most important drivers. They are impacting crop water needs. So please look at the differences based on those factors. So what we learned from this data and analysis, so CIMIS and special CIMIS are important free tools we have in California for irrigation management. But as I mentioned, they are providing us grass ET, well-managed grass ET. FRET is also a reliable tool for forecasting grass ET for the next week or 1 week ahead of your irrigation schedule. So the crop coefficient curve we develop and 3 monthly water use we develop for different locations are also good, effective irrigation management tools. OpenET and Avocado irrigation calculator, I believe they are the major, tools we might think about at the moment. But how we use these tools are very important. As I mentioned, I'm going to write an article soon on these issues and how we can use them and how should use that information. And this is the last conclusion I have. I didn't have time to talk about soil moisture sensing, but this is the main recommendation we have. The effective irrigation management needs using both ET and soil moisture sensing. So the strategy you need to use as effective irrigation management tools or a strategy is you follow ET or crop water needs and you do the adjustment based on the soil moisture sensing data. So you need always soil moisture sensors and you integrate these tools together, and I'm sure you can do a great job for your irrigation scheduling. So that's all I have.
And you're being recorded. Great. Helping people with agricultural crops. The Irrigation Center was just getting started when I was graduating from Cal Poly a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And they've come a long way. I follow a lot of the research. And today, Stu's going to be talking to us about low volume irrigation and drip. And for those of you that don't know, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo has quite a planting of avocados now. They have an ag research center where they're focusing on crops that they feel the coastal farmers will be able to succeed in the future. Avocados, strawberries. Oh, come on, Stu, what's the other crop we're working on up there?
There's blueberries up there. There's citrus.
There's a lot of berries. Driscoll does all kinds of berries up in this area. And then, of course, we're most famous for our Paso Robles wines.
Right. Wines. Forgot about those guys. Okay, so it's a lot different than when I was there when they just taught me how to grow alfalfa and cotton. With that, Stu, we love having you here. We appreciate you talking to both the Avocado Society and the Irrigated Lands Group of San Diego. So with that, it's all yours. Thank you.
All right. So I was asked to kind of focus on drip versus microsprayer irrigation systems on avocados. I've spoken to this group, I think, about every 3 years, and it was one of the things I touched on the last talk that I did. And since then, I've talked to growers. I've talked to our farm manager, Johnny Rosecrans here at Cal Poly. There's some different opinions out there about this. And I'm going to end on a couple of slides that just kind of talk about, you know, what I see the trends on where I think this is kind of going in the future. I still haven't found any research money to go out and study impacts on yields and actual practices that are being done here. So I'm going to report on just kind of a lot of opinions, a lot of discussion on this, and then I'm going to make a couple of offers as we get to the end of this on, you know, potential things that we could be doing in the future to look a little bit deeper into this topic. So my topic, if you haven't heard my name before, it's Stuart Stiles. I'm a professor here at Cal Poly. I'm in the Bioresource and Ag Engineering department, and I'm also the director of this ITRC, the Irrigation Training and Research Center. So as you mentioned, we've been around for about 40 years now. We do a lot of irrigation courses for the university. We do about 13 classes for the university now, and we do about 50 professional workshops that we're doing stuff for industry, you know, all over the countryside here. We have a little bit of international work to boot here. So, all right, so I'm just going to start with some basic drip things. You know, I know when I do these talks, sometimes there's a whole bunch of experts in the room, and then sometimes there's a couple of people that haven't heard some of the terminology. So I'm going to start with some basics. I'm going to go through the questions to ask if if you have a drip irrigation system, or if you have the typical drip system or a typical microspray systems. What are the things that you should be looking at if you're trying to improve your performance, or if you're out there maybe going to redo a whole system and you want to go to something new? What are the types of questions you should be looking at? I'm going to go over some of the performance terms and how we measure performance and the things that we go out in the field to try to assess that. And then I'm going to end on the topic I was supposed to talk about here, the drip versus the microspray. Okay, so I'm going to start with the drip basics here. You know, usually the first question a lot of guys are looking at if they're talking about doing something new or changing out their old system is, you know, should I go with drip or should I go with microspray? And so I got to tell one quick story. My father was a citrus farmer in the Porterville area, and at that point in time, everyone did drip irrigation. And so this is 50 plus years ago. And they all of a sudden they noticed they were getting more and more of this problem, and they would get a little mat build up, kind of like that green mat that you see on the microsprayer slide. But it would start to build up, and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And after about 10 years of drip irrigation, they would have a big mat about 6 or 8 feet wide. And what was happening is the water was trying to go down, but it wasn't going down. It was sealing up the top part of the soil surface. And the problem was it was a chemical reaction between using really pure water, the very pure Friant Canal water. It was very pure. It had low salts in it, and they were using that for irrigation. And the hydrogen ions would replace the calcium ions on the CEC sites, the cation exchange sites, and it would cause plating to occur. And so that water wouldn't penetrate anymore. So it would have to go out and then go down. And the solution to the problem was pretty easy. They all switched to microsprayer. They got the water spread out over a much larger area. They went up and broke the surface up and then took care of it. So you pretty much, it's very hard to see too much citrus out there that's on single line drip systems, or at least for the last 40 years, it's switched over to microsprays. Now, I know some of the citrus guys I've been talking to lately have switched back to dual line drip and some other things, but there was a long history of switching over from one industry. So a lot of the discussion is about this wetted area. You know, how big is the wetted area? You know, can you get sufficient wetted area if you're trying to do scheduling, or if you're trying to do frost control, or whatever it is you're looking at for this wetted area? Obviously, the microspray, a single sprayer, is going to put out a bigger area. The dual line drip is going to be a little bit more of a challenge to get the same wetted area, mostly because you're going to have to try to spread those two lines out over a berm. And if you're on undulating topography, if you have these big berms, there's always a challenge of keeping the hoses on the berm here. So there's always a challenge in trying to get the wetted areas to be similar, so that you're not affecting your scheduling. So how about these emitters? You know, we're talking about drip and we're talking about microspray. And back when I started in this business back in the 80s, the PC products, the pressure compensating products, were not great. The material was failing on them. You put any kind of acid, you put any chlorine in them, the materials would kind of disappear on you. And we weren't real enthusiastic about going to PC products. So fast forward to 2025, they're excellent. They do a great job, and we all like PC products that are out there. The drip emitters are fantastic. They've been performing well for years. As soon as it gets up above a certain minimum pressure, you see the characteristic on the performance curves. They're all relatively flat, and they give you pretty much the nominal pressure that you have designed in your drip products out there. So you notice the flows are really low, but the characteristics are really strong for this PC characteristic. So regardless of the pressure that you have, you're getting basically the same flow rate. And again, it's close to that nominal flow rate. So when we switch over to microsprayers for this discussion, they don't perform as well. And especially the ones that are PC that have been purchased on a premium. And what we've seen is that they have really high pressure requirements. They still have a lot of variability in their flow. And then often it's not close to the nominal flow when you go out there to the field. So you're not getting the exact number if you're trying to calculate your ET estimates based on gallons per tree or a volume of gallons being replaced every irrigation event. A lot of times your numbers are off because the nominal flow isn't the value that you have out there. So the data doesn't look as good. When we see a curve that's got a big slope to it like that means it's not giving you a PC characteristic. But these four curves here are all PC microsprayers, and the manufacturers charge a premium for this. So you're paying a premium to get that characteristic, but you notice it's just got a lot of curvature in it, and it starts to level off. Some of them level off at the top up there, but there's still some variability. And the other thing that you should notice is that the pressure where they're supposed to start working is way to the right compared to the drip products. It's up around 20 to 30 psi before it kicks into that minimum pressure requirement to give you a PC characteristic. So we definitely kind of pick on microsprays a little bit because they don't have the same characteristics, and you're going to get lower uniformities. You're going to get a worse performance a little bit just from that kind of variability, unless you keep your pressures really constant and you keep your pressures really high. So if you're not keeping your pressures high and you're not keeping them constant, you're going to have a lot more uniformity issues, which means those parts of the field that aren't getting as much water, you're going to have lower yields, you're going to have salinity buildup, you're going to have those potential issues. So some of the questions that come up when we're going through these kind of exercise like this, you got to talk about what kind of filtration you need. Obviously, if you're going to use drip, you're going to have to use something like the media tanks, the sand media tanks, because they give you that higher level of filtration to get those smaller particles. The drip irrigation, typically you're looking at trying to get something that's less than about 1/10 the size of a 0.5 millimeter pencil. And that's a really small particle. You're trying to keep that out of your system so you don't get pluggage in your drip system out there. And so there's a lot of information out there about the sand media tanks and using them. A lot of the folks on the Central Coast don't have them. They use the screen filters. And the reason is typically is because they have really clean water. But if you have any kind of a reservoir, if you're storing the water and then pumping out of a reservoir, you're going to get exposed to a lot of algae, a lot of floating debris potentially, and you typically would have to go to a sand media filter option. One of the things that we investigated here a couple of years ago is we looked at the under drain designs, and we found that they were all slightly different and they all performed differently. And we found that the best test we could do is to cut the lids off of these sand media tanks and just observe the performance of these units out there. So this is a video. I'm hoping it's coming through here. Short video of just showing that bubbling action or that boiling action. So where it's boiling, that's a good thing because it's getting a lot of flow and it's going to clean out the material that were caught in the sand media tank. Normally the flow is down. So this is in the backflush mode and it's pushing the debris up and through the backflush line. So you can see it's boiling there, and it's good and bad. It's good because it's boiling, it's getting the material out. It's bad that it's not uniform over that whole surface area. And that's what we would like to see on these sand media tanks. So within 2 years of us publishing this report and putting videos out like this, they all changed their underdrain designs. And the cost for us to go back and reevaluate is extraordinary. So we didn't go back and check them again. But they all went in there to try to improve the underdrain characteristics here. So the biggest thing that I run into on the sand media tanks is this backflush adjustment, is getting the correct flow rate based on the manufacturer's recommendations, and you can change that on your backflow valve, and then making sure that you have adequate pressure so that when you adequate pump capacity and pressure, so that when you do go into a backflush mode, the pressure stays high enough to keep the backflush mode going and get backflush to occur, but it also that you have plenty of pressure going out to the rest of the system, so that you don't just have a horrible drop in your uniformity values just because you're having to go through a backflush the cycle. So the thing that we like to recommend to the growers is to go out there and use a nylon stocking. I know it's kind of hard to see it in that photo, but that's a nylon stocking that I'm wrapping around the end of the pipe there on a backflush cycle, so we can see what kind of material is coming up. If we go out and do an evaluation of a field, this kind of helps us get an idea of what kind of recommendations we might want to come back with if we can see what kind of material is being caught in the filtration process. So we see a lot of these on the Central Coast now, these scanning screen filters. You can see the red filter there, horizontal filter in the slide. There's a lot of other things going on in the slide, but that horizontal screen filter is a really good replacement for the sand media tank, especially if you don't really have a lot of organic material that you're trying to filter. It does a pretty good job with just a light, you know, the wells that we have on Central Coast. It does a pretty good job. I have used them here at Cal Poly on reservoirs, and we have 2 that have been out there for 30 years. And as long as they're maintained properly, if we get the screens pressure washed annually and do a hot dip or the chlorine dip with them, they've been working all these years, and we haven't had to go to a higher filtration level. But the application that those go to are sprinklers, so they don't have the small particle size requirement that we would have with drip, and so we've been able to get them work in that application. So just a couple of slides on this. There's a couple of different manufacturers that are putting these out and a couple of different designs, but basically it has a wand that when it goes through a filter cycle, it drops the inside of the unit drops to atmospheric pressure where it's discharging, and the wand goes around and cleans all the debris off the screen. So it's a very effective way to set up filtration out there. So I had some bullet points on this. You know, I've kind of covered them already. The big thing that it does is it doesn't require as much of a backflush water cycle as the sand media tank. So that's one of the big selling points. But it does require a really high pressure for it to work. If it has low pressure, it just won't work. Some of the other big characteristics that guys like about it is it has a smaller footprint, putting it out there at your pump station. The sand media tanks, if you have a big flow rate, it tends to take up a pretty good footprint out there with a concrete pad and the piping and everything to make that work. So flow meter questions. This has been a challenge my whole career. I keep going out to sites and they look like this, where there's just no logical place to put a flow meter. I'm not being critical of the Central Coast growers, but I've seen a lot more of these, I think, on the coast than over in the Central Valley. The Central Valley, they've got a lot more opportunities where they can put in straight sections. We've been working with magnetic meters now for a number of years, and I used to have slides on it because it was the new thing, and it's really not the new thing anymore. It's kind of the standard that a lot of folks have gone to. Most of the main reason that growers are going to mag meters, the magnetic meters, is that they don't have a large requirement for the number of straight sections upstream. So we could actually put a mag meter in this pumping configuration here, and it would work in that application. We have quite a bit of information on mag meters online if you're more interested in that topic. The one thing I will mention is that you can't inject fertilizers upstream of a magnetic meter. And that's something that I was using them for about 15 to 17 years before someone finally, brought that up as a big red flag. And we did some testing on it. And sure enough, if you inject fertilizers upstream, it'll throw the mag meter into a tailspin of incorrect data. And the reason is it can't handle changes in the electrical conductivity of the material that you're putting into it. That's the issue. So if you are using the old style propellometers and you're up against the SB88 or the Sigma rules and you have to fix the propellometer or meet the manufacturer's requirements on a propellometer, one of the easiest things to do is to put straightening vanes or one of these flow conditioners in front of your propellometer, and it will decrease the diameters required upstream, so you don't have to just take it out and put in a mag meter. This seems to be a cheaper option for some of the growers that are going down that path. So VFDs, I was asked about doing something about pumps and VFDs, and I just want to mention that we have specifications on pumps and VFDs on our website. I only have one slide on pumps and VFDs, but 20 years ago it was a new thing, and they were extremely expensive, and everybody was looking into them, and some guys were doing it and some guys weren't. And then fast forward to 2025, and it seems like almost all the growers have these out there now. They see the advantage of having it, of slow starting their pumps so they don't get a big surge of sand coming up through their well screens, or just trying to prevent water hammer on starting up systems and things like that. We're having a dual capability where they can be run for irrigation and they also can be used for frost control. There's a lot of things. Some of the problems that we ran into is that you got to be really careful because not all VFD manufacturers are created equally. The manufacturers have different levels of ethics, and they'll sell you something that doesn't work. Other guys will put all the filters on and do it the correct way. You got to be careful not to undersize it. If you have a 75 horsepower pump, you got to buy a 100 horsepower VFD unit. It's a sizing thing, and it helps with keeping the unit cool. And the last thing is to make sure you keep your unit cool. And most of the manufacturers now are selling these panels that have some form of HVAC or a cooling fan or something in them to prevent that from being a problem. But the stuff early on that we were using back in 2000, 2005, that was a major challenge that we were running into with a lot of growers, is they would have a heating issue. So fertigation, yes, I did use the same slide. I like this slide for multiple purposes here. I did a talk down in San Diego County probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I talked about some of these new fertilizers that guys are using. They're doing calcium with liquid fertilizers, and I'm not going to talk about it this time because I brought it up, and then someone said they tried it down there. But it's a real acidic fertilizer, and with your acidic soils, it's not something good to add, because it just makes the acidic soil problem even worse. So I'll stay away from fertigation on this talk. So a lot of folks are interested in trying to improve their yields, and I usually sell the whole irrigation performance idea that we can improve yields by equaling out the upper end and the lower end of the fields, or the locations of the field are getting adequate water. They're going to have a certain yield, and then the locations that aren't getting adequate water are going to improve those yields. So that's usually the selling point that we talk about for getting yield improvement out there. I know there's a lot of challenges with growers. I know there's a lot of input things that have changed over the years. This curve's got a lot of information on it, but I'll try to kind of boil it down to a couple of key points. So we were tracking the water use in California since 1960. And it's got a 5-year lag in it because it takes 5 years for the DWR folks to put together their data sets and let us use them for a report. And so you can see the orange bars are the tonnage of crops being grown in California. And then the blue line represents that slightly decreasing amount of water, total water that we use in agriculture. And then the red line represents an efficiency calculation, or a uniformity calculation, however you want to say it. It's a ratio analysis between the crop yield versus the applied water. And it's all been great. And I've done this for years. Some guys did it up through the 90s, and I continued it up through 2015, and it was always going up. And then what we've seen in 2010 to 2020 here is things are starting to level off. And I've talked to a number of folks to try to explain this, and I've gotten a number of different answers about it. You know, the old story, if you ask 10 experts, you know, what their opinion is, you get 20 answers, and that's kind of how this has gone. And my gut feeling is there's a lot to this. There's crops that are being shifted to different areas. There's the water issues in the Central Valley. There's water issues with Sigma and other challenges with the legal right to get access to water. We've had more areas have groundwater changes, groundwater level changes that have created issues. And then I keep hearing, you know, growers talk about things getting hotter or hotter for you know, certain durations that are affecting crop yields and quality. So I'm going to leave that very touchy topic alone and just say I'm plotting the trend here, and I'm not saying that's the trend with avocados. I'm saying that's the trend that we're seeing across the state here. So let's switch back to our topic here. What about this hydraulic design? You know, is it designed properly? And I know when I do a talk like this, and I only have a few minutes, I really can't get everybody interested in hydraulics and friction calculations and things like that. So I try to stay on the high level on this thing and just talk about, you know, what we're trying to look for if we're talking to a designer out there. So we look at manifold placement, manifold valves out there, trying to get the starting pressures right. How long can we run hoses? Doing friction calculations. You know, what diameter hose do we need? What are the correct inlet pressures to make everything have a good uniformity? And then can we flush those hoses easily out in the field? You know, the basic hydraulics aren't real complicated here. It's a matter of just kind of knowing, you know, how to put the pieces together and use the right tools that are available. Our design book has been used for decades now. It went up to the 5th edition and we stopped doing this. Charles Bird is now retired from ITRC. So he's off enjoying life and doing his own private practice stuff, but this is available. There's a QR scan on the screen and it'll be available. It's available with the recording, and you can get that QR screen, or you can just go to the website and look for free resources, and you can download the drip book if you're interested in getting the full document. It's almost 300 pages of going through the drip irrigation design and then going through micro irrigation designs, and then there's stuff on tape irrigation in there also if you're a strawberry grower. So the bottom line is we really want to try to share with a growers group like this is what are the questions for you to ask to these irrigation designers and these manufacturers if you're going to go out there and try to make a business decision between systems here. So the program that we set up was called this Irrigation Consumer Bill of Rights. And there's a scan there if you want to try to get to the handout on this. And it's on the website if you want to go to that. It'll give you the information. But it's a list of questions that you should try to kind of target if you're going to go out there and make a business decision to pay for a system, to buy these systems. They're very expensive. You know, if you go down the wrong path, it's very expensive to try to fix it. And then you want to kind of know, you know, what direction you should be, you know, turning, you know, left or right on looking at a certain idea here. So we spent a lot of time putting those questions together, and and I'm going to keep going. I heard something, but I'm going to hope that that was a little glitch. Maybe it was on my side. So the thing that we're looking for is the performance. Can we get good performance? Can we get good uniformity? Are we looking at the uniformity today, or are we looking at the uniformity 20 years from now? And, you know, this whole thing about design and then the management of the system gets tied together here. You know, we want a good design, we want a good designer, we want to pay for the equipment and get it set up right. And then we want to make sure we do the maintenance on it so that we can keep it working long term here. So uniformity is a pretty basic idea. If you don't have good pressures, if you have plugged emitters out there, a portion of the field is not going to get adequate water. If you have good uniformity, the plants are all going to be happy out there. We got water in the right places. This DU that we calculate is the DU-LQ, the DU of the low quarter. It's a statistics term that we just take the average of our low quarter values and compare it to the average of all of our elements. And I'll explain that in a second later with an example. So what are we looking for? The numbers that we're looking for are greater than 0.9. If it's greater than 0.9, it's an excellent system out there. If it's down around 0.8, that's a little bit less than average. If it's down at 0.7, you're not doing a very good job out there. And usually that's a management problem or maintenance issue. It's not being done properly. If it's down around 0.5 or 0.6, it's horrible. And it really ought to be, somebody's got to come in and kind of do an intervention and kind of start over. So these are the values that we've picked up in our evaluation teams over the years. And the takeaway on this slide is that the drip irrigation is really similar in performance to the microspray. You can get good performance on microspray. You just have to design it properly out there. It doesn't mean the one's better than the other from a performance perspective, but there are some differences that I'm going to address on the avocados later here. So if you do have really poor uniformity and you're dealing with this out in your system out there, you got to keep in mind that it's a challenge if you're putting soil moisture sensors in. Where do you put them? Do you put them in the dry area, or do you put them in the wet area, or do you find some average place in between? It becomes a real challenge out there. The other thing is with your fertility or your leaf samples that you're taking out there. So what do we usually find? Usually we find when we have problems out there is the hoses aren't being flushed properly. So we have all kinds of this material that will catch in the nylon stockings at the end, and then we try to figure out exactly what it is and what's causing the problem and what the source of it is. So a couple of slides from different examples that we had out in the field, but this is what we're really looking for. Is we're looking for those hose flushes to be flushing clean, or maybe to not run for more than about 20 or 30 seconds. If they run for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, we're not doing adequate flushing, and we're not doing adequate filtration out on the systems out there. The other one that causes big performance differences is pressure differences between the hoses. The pressure differences can be caused by not having the right starting pressure, which can be caused by undulating topography. The other thing that runs into a problem out there, if we have big friction losses in your main lines, so we recommend using the preset pressure regulators. The other thing we recommend is to get rid of all those hose screens. I know folks put them in. They put them in because they want some safety valve protection, to make sure the system, a big slug of sand doesn't go down and hit the end of the hoses and get plugged up in the emitters. But they end up causing more problems than they help solve because they get plugged up so easily. And then it causes a big pressure drop across it. And then you have a performance challenge out in the field out there. That's probably one of the #1 recommendations that we come up against if guys put their hose, if they still have hose screens installed. So this assessment, I want to get into a detail of one example that we did on the Central Coast last year. So we have these evaluation programs. We had the program active last year in 2024. We did about 45 evaluations throughout the Central Coast area here, including, I think we went all the way down to Ventura, and we could certainly go all the way down to Escondido if we got some requests. If we get multiple requests, we could probably spend a week down there and do 4 or 5 evaluations down there also this year. So this is the results from one of the evaluations that we did. You can see the pressures. This is on a microspray system, and the pressures look a little bit low over there. The microsprayer, this one that they had, the Boatsmith Fanjet, they recommend pressures about 20 psi, and all the pressure values here were below 20. Take that back. There was 2 or 3 that are above 20. But this is going to give you really low performance characteristics because there's going to be a slope to this curve here, and it's going to give you variable flow through the system. So this is the data that we collected, and you can see in the 2 high pressure areas there at location A and B, those numbers look pretty similar. They're pretty close to the same value of about 12 gallons per hour. But in the location C, we go out to the worst part of the field where it's low pressure and it's furthest away from the pump. You can see how low the values are there. Now, we calculate a distribution uniformity based on the low quarter of the values for each one of these data sets. And you can look at it just kind of scanning it real quick there. On location A, there's like only 1 low value. So the DU on location A and B actually is probably pretty good. But when we compare all 3 of them together, you end up seeing why we dropped the DU so much. So this DU is down at 0.76, but it's a good example to show you that if we just got the pressures up higher, if we went out there and maybe cut the block size down, or we worked on getting a pump that's putting out adequate pressure and flow for the design, we could easily get this performance up in the 0.9 range by making some pretty straightforward changes out there in the system. So this question came up a couple of 3 years ago, and I pulled this slide deck from this fellow that was down in Australia doing this. And I know it's Australian, so you know everything's upside down or backwards, however you want to say it. So anyway, this Henk van Niekerk had a really good observation set of data that he did, where he compared drip to the PC drip to the PC micro spray system there, and I've got the link to it, so if anybody wants to look at it further. So just so we're clear here, this is what we're talking about comparing right now, is a dual line drip system that comes off a manifold, and it's a PC product and it's an inline drip product compared to the PC micro sprayers. So the fellow that did this deal, it was a grower. He seems like he was a researcher / grower, but he came up with a bunch of conclusions out of this. He really liked the drip more than the microspray, and these were his key takeaways. Is the drip had lower maintenance, less labor, less cost. He liked it because it didn't have the emitters out there, or it didn't have the microsprayers that could get damaged during pruning and harvesting. And I know one of the comments that Johnny Rosecrans makes here at Cal Poly, the avocado manager here, is he wants to go to these inline drip because they're out of the way. You know, anytime he has all this equipment where it's in the way, when they do tree trimming or the harvest operation or anything out, they've got to go out there and send a couple of guys, and they got to spend a couple of days going out there and touching up the irrigation system, putting the spaghetti lines back in, and he sees that as a definite advantage. You know, it's just a matter of making sure that we can keep the lines in the right spot. The drip products require less pressure, so you can lower your pump pressure requirements, so you have less electrical requirements. You know, the selling point that he had, and I think this might be unique to the Australian environment down there, where they get a lot of high winds, they get a lot of high evaporation losses. I know on the Central Coast we're not going to have that same condition, but he saw a big difference between the evaporation characteristics between the drip and the microspray. And I want to touch on that topic at the end of this slide set. I found other things on the internet that have all these advantages, and there's a lot of comments people make about drip being better than microspray. But I know, again, that the challenge that I heard on the Central Coast here is that undulating topography, the high berms, and trying to keep those hoses up on a bed. So I've heard this, and I've seen other presentations. This is a NetFM presentation that they were kind of pushing drip over the microspray and why it might be a better option here. But the one thing that hit me the last time I presented this and talked about it was, how do you keep those hoses on the bed? So these guys up in Northern California at Alsco Geyer came up with this product, and they're selling enough of them now that they've got the price down to $2.80. I think they started at $5 and they weren't selling any of them, but they got a couple of growers to do this because they have the tree crops up there that they're doing. They got different tree crops, almonds and fruit crops and stuff that they're doing, and they're on undulating topography, and they had the same challenge when they went to the drip lines, is keeping them up on the berms. So he came up with this product. It's a simple thing that you can drill in. It's plastic. You put a little impact drill on it, and you can screw it in, and it'll hold the hose in place. Now, I know $2.80 is probably still too expensive for most growers if you're going out there and putting it on a 80-acre field, but it is something that they've set up to be able to do this without trying to just snake the hoses between the trees. So I thought at least it was something to share that was different than the last time I talked about this topic. The last thing I'm going to cover here, and I know I'm out of time, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions, is the trend that I see is that we have folks going to dual line, the tri-line, and the quad line systems out there. So they'll go to a dual line drip, and sometimes they'll have valves on both drip lines. And the reason that they're valving both of the drip irrigation lines is they'll irrigate one side of the bed first, and then the other side of the bed later. So they might, if they have a 4-hour irrigation set, they might go 2 hours here and then switch it and do 2 hours here. And that requires a whole lot of manifolds or or manual switching of valves, but that's what I hear guys doing, and they have different reasons. One of the reasons I heard was that they irrigate for 4 hours, it saturates the bed too much, and they don't get that aeration or that recovery time by the time they want to irrigate again. And this by having the shorter durations, it helps with that a little bit. The third line on this case is the micro line, and they actually leave the micro line in place, and they save it for 2 reasons: for frost control during the winter, and then also for salinity control. They can turn it on, wet a larger area, and push more salts down and use it for that purpose. And I know strawberries aren't what we're talking about today, but that's exactly what the strawberry folks have done. Is they have they have the tape that's underneath the mulch there in that lower photo, and then they have the microspray system that's up on top. And the microspray works. It has 3 functions. It works for doing salinity control, helps push salt down away from the plants. It also works to give you frost control, gives you some frost control protection. And then the third thing that it does is it helps with mites. They found that it gives you some pest control. So what I'm hearing is these dual and these tri and now these quad systems. I don't have a slide on it, but the quad system that I've seen out there, the vineyard guys here are doing it. They got 2 drip lines that are on separate valve control. They have a microsprayer that's on frost protection control. And then they have a 4th line that's actually running along the base of the vines. And that one is connected to misters that are up above the vines. And they're using that for climate control because they're getting too many heat days in a row now with the weather pattern changing. And it's like 10 days in a row of over 100 degrees. They have to start cooling the plants, or they'll find that they end up with a yield and quality impacts if they let the plants get hot for too long. So they've gone to this 4th system out there. And I know that all reflects a lot of cost, and I'm not being flippant about saying, well, we ought to put more lines out there. But I know what I see when I'm driving out in different parts of California and different parts of the state and talking to growers. There's this definite trend to do multiple purposes with the designs. And the one thing I'll say about that, you got to be really careful with your designer. They got to be aware of all that up front, because you want the systems to match up. Otherwise, you end up with a whole lot of valve operations out there for the poor irrigator that they have to manually be trying to adjust these things. And it's much better if it's built into the design of the system. So I'm going to end on that slide and say we got stuff on our website and open it up to questions.
Great. Do we have any questions for Professor Stewart? No. Wow. You answered all their questions. While you guys are thinking of questions, one of the things he was talking about, and he's probably not aware about it because he's in the Central Coast, but Mission Resource Center down here gives you a free survey, and it'll give you the coefficient of your grove. And I have done this survey. I've owned my grove, oh my gosh, 35 years. And I've done this survey 3 times. And what I did was I looked up Mission Resource, and it's if you guys want the web address, it's Mission, MISSION, You've already paid for this service. It's free. Use it. It really helps. He was talking about pressure regulating sprinklers, and I was one of the first users of pressure regulator sprinklers down here, and I used phosphorus acid in my pressure regulating sprinklers, and they were no longer regulating anything. They became big sprayers. And then I also had stainless steel, I won't mention the brand, pressure regulators that also were not big fans of fertilizer. So having these surveys often will really help you save water. And you paid for it already. The Conservation Service is there for you. So with that, do you have any questions? Professor, thank you very much. We really appreciate you today.